She threw me out of the house the day after my son's funeral, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You have until 6 o'clock tomorrow, Lillian. That should be plenty of time." I'm Lillian Ashcroft. I'm 67 years old. I've buried my parents, my husband Harold, and now my only child. And when my daughter-in-law told me to pack my life into suitcases and leave the house I'd helped pay for, you know what I did? I said, okay. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. Then I drove to a Hampton Inn on Route 9, sat on a polyester bedspread that smelled like industrial cleaning products, and waited. Because at my age, you learn that the quietest person in the room is often the one paying the most attention. This story isn't about revenge. It's about a quiet man who fixed broken things without asking for credit, and the letter he left behind that changed everything. But let me start from the beginning, because to understand how I ended up homeless at 67, you need to understand the phone call that came at 3:17 on a Tuesday morning. I wasn't asleep when the phone rang. I'm never asleep at 3 in the morning anymore. Ever since Harold passed 8 years ago, my body forgot how to rest through the night. Some kind of biological clock that breaks when you lose the person who used to breathe beside you for 41 years. So I was sitting in the kitchen, the way I always did, drinking chamomile tea and reading one of Harold's old letters. He used to write me notes even after we'd been married for decades. Little things tucked into my purse or left on my pillow. "Lily, you're still the best thing that ever happened to me. H." I kept every single one in a shoebox under my bed. I was reading one of those letters when Alaric called. My son's voice came through strained, breathless, wrong in a way that made my hand tighten around the phone until my knuckles went white. "Mom, something's wrong. My chest. I can't." The line went dead. I drove to Hartford Hospital in the rain. I remember everything about that drive. The way my hands trembled on the steering wheel, the streetlights blurring through the water on the windshield, the red light at the intersection of Main and Prospect that I ran without even thinking about it. The first time in my life I'd ever broken a traffic law. I was a school teacher for 34 years. I followed rules, but rules don't matter when your child can't breathe. By the time I reached the emergency room, my 45-year-old son was gone. "Massive heart attack," the doctor explained. His name tag said Dr. Kenneth Ward, and he had the kind of clinical detachment that comes from delivering this news too many times. "Nothing we could have done, Mrs. Ashcroft. It was very fast. He likely didn't suffer." Didn't suffer. I wanted to ask Dr. Ward how he could possibly know that. How anyone could know whether the last 30 seconds of a man's life involved suffering. But I didn't ask, because my mouth had stopped working and my legs had stopped holding me up, and a nurse whose name I never learned guided me to a plastic chair in the waiting room. Phoebe arrived 20 minutes after me. My daughter-in-law came through the automatic doors wearing a camel-colored coat over what looked like pajamas, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She saw me sitting in that plastic chair, and her first words, not "Is he okay?" Not "What happened?" Her first words were, "Have they told you about the life insurance? Whether there's paperwork we need to handle tonight?" I stared at her. "Phoebe, Alaric is—" "I know." She cut me off. "I got the call too. I just need to know if there's anything time-sensitive, financially." At the time, I told myself she was in shock. People say strange things when their world collapses. I'd said strange things when Harold died. I once asked the funeral director if Harold would be cold in the casket, as if temperature mattered to a dead man. Grief makes you irrational. So I tucked Phoebe's strange question away and tried to forgive it. But then they took us to see him. Alaric lay on a hospital bed with a white sheet pulled up to his chest, and he looked like he was sleeping. His face was peaceful. His hands were folded. He looked like he might open his eyes at any moment and say something quiet and kind, the way he always did. Phoebe walked to the bedside and took his hand. "And this is the part I need you to understand because it matters later." She cried. Real tears, not performance, not strategy. She held Alaric's hand and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not "I'm sorry you're gone," not "I'm sorry this happened," just "I'm sorry." And I stood there in that sterile room watching my daughter-in-law apologize to my dead son, and I wondered, sorry for what? The next 3 days were consumed by funeral arrangements. I offered to help with the planning, offered to help pay for everything. Alaric had been my only child after all. Phoebe shut me down immediately. I'm his wife. I know what he would have wanted. Fair enough. I retreated to the guest room, the room I'd been living in for 2 years, and focused on what I could control. Writing the eulogy, calling relatives, trying to hold myself together with the kind of mechanical determination that carries women my age through impossible situations. I should tell you how I ended up in that guest room in the first place. 2 years ago, after Harold's pension ran dry and property taxes kept climbing, I sold our little house in Glastonbury. It was nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a yard with Harold's rose bushes, 32 years of memories pressed into every wall. After paying off the remaining mortgage, I walked away with $95,000. Alaric and Phoebe were looking at houses at the time. A colonial on Winding Brook Lane, asking price $480,000. They were $40,000 short on the down payment. I remember the day I handed Alaric that check. $40,000. Everything I could spare and still survive. He took it with both hands and looked me in the eye with that serious expression he'd had since he was a little boy. "This is a loan, Mom," he said. "I'll pay you back every cent. I promise." Phoebe stood beside him, smiling. "Of course we will, Mom." That was the last time she ever called me Mom with a real smile. The plan was for me to stay with them temporarily while I found a smaller place of my own. Somehow temporary stretched into permanent, and I settled into a routine of helping around the house. Cooking dinners, doing laundry, keeping the garden. Being useful. At 67, being useful felt like the only currency I had left. That first night after Alaric died, alone in the guest room, I noticed something. The photographs on the dresser had been rearranged. The photo of Alaric's college graduation was still there. The wedding photo of Alaric and Phoebe was still there. But the photos of me and Alaric, the one from his 30th birthday, the one from Christmas 3 years ago, the one of us at the state fair when he was 12, both of us laughing with cotton candy on our faces. Gone. All of them. Someone had started erasing me from this house before my son was even in the ground. I called my sister Ruth in Phoenix that night. She picked up on the first ring. "I'm coming," Ruth said before I could finish explaining. "I'm booking a flight right now." Ruth arrived the next morning. She's 70, 3 years older than me, and she has the kind of directness that comes from spending your whole life saying exactly what you think. She took one look at Phoebe on the phone with the florist and pulled me into the guest room. "I told you 5 years ago, Lily. That woman married Alaric for stability, not love. You didn't listen." "She loved him, Ruth. In her own way." "In her own way means not at all. That's not fair. You don't know what happens inside someone else's marriage." Ruth took my hands. "I know what I see. And what I see is a woman who's already calculating her next move while your son's body is still at the funeral home. Watch her, Lily. Watch carefully." The funeral was held on a Friday at Redwood Community Church. Pastor Thomas Brennan, who had known our family for 15 years, led the service. The sanctuary was full. Alaric's colleagues from the insurance company where he worked as a software engineer, neighbors from Winding Brook Lane, friends from college who'd driven hours to be there. I sat in the front pew beside Phoebe. Ruth sat behind me with her hand on my shoulder. Phoebe's older sister, Donna Whitfield, sat on Phoebe's other side. She'd flown in from Baltimore, where she worked as a nurse. Donna was 44, practical, protective of her younger sister. Not a bad person as far as I could tell. Just someone who'd always choose family loyalty over doing the right thing. Pastor Brennan spoke about Alaric with genuine warmth. One phrase struck me so hard I had to grip the edge of the pew. "Alaric Ashcroft," he said, "was a quiet man who showed love through action, not words." When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. And I told them about the bird. "When Alaric was 7 years old," I said, "he found a sparrow in our backyard with a broken wing. Most kids would have poked at it or gotten bored after a few minutes and moved on. But Alaric brought that bird inside, made it a nest out of a shoebox and cotton balls, and fed it with an eyedropper every 4 hours for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He set his alarm clock. He was 7, and he got up in the middle of the night to feed a bird. And on the 22nd day, that sparrow flew off our back porch and disappeared into the maple tree at the end of the yard. Alaric watched it go and said, 'I think he'll be okay now, Mom.' That was my son. He fixed broken things quietly, without asking for credit. And if you knew him, really knew him, Then you know exactly what I mean. After the service, the reception was held at the house. Phoebe had arranged everything perfectly. Elegant flower arrangements, Alaric's favorite hymns playing softly, platters of food from the Italian restaurant he'd loved. Say what you will about Phoebe, she knew how to orchestrate an event. It was her profession, after all. I spent most of the reception in the receiving line, accepting condolences that all blurred together. He was a good man. He's in a better place. If there's anything I can do. The same words, repeated until they lose all meaning. It was during a break, when I went to the kitchen to get more ice, that I heard the conversation. The kitchen was separated from the dining room by a wall of flower arrangements, white lilies and blue hydrangeas. I was reaching into the freezer when Phoebe's voice drifted through the flowers. The life insurance alone will cover the mortgage for at least 2 years. She was speaking in a low, efficient tone. And without the extra expenses, I can probably stretch it to 3. Donna's voice came next, and there was hesitation in it. What about Lillian? Where will she go? That's not my problem anymore. She can figure it out. Phoebe? That seems harsh. She just lost her only— Don't start, Donna. Phoebe's voice hardened. You don't live with her. You don't know what it's like having someone watching you, judging you, in your house every single day. Every meal I cook, she's hovering. Every decision I make, she has an opinion. It's like living under a microscope. I stood there with a bag of ice in my hands, frozen in more ways than one. Because here's the thing. And this is the part where I have to be honest with you, even though it doesn't make me look good. Phoebe wasn't entirely wrong. I had hovered. I had reorganized her kitchen once without asking. I had commented on how she loaded the dishwasher. I had, on more than one occasion, made dinner without checking whether she'd already planned something. I came from a generation where a mother's role was to be useful, and being useful meant doing things. It never occurred to me that my helpfulness might feel like surveillance. But knowing you have flaws doesn't mean you deserve to be thrown away. Extra expenses. That's what Phoebe had called me, like I was a line item on a budget spreadsheet. Like 2 years of cooking, cleaning, laundry, and companionship could be reduced to a number that was too high. Ruth flew back to Phoenix the morning after the funeral. At the departure gate, she held my shoulders and looked me in the eye. Call me every day. And Lily, don't react. Whatever that woman does, don't react. Wait. Watch. Promise me. I promise. That evening, Phoebe knocked on my door. She didn't come in. She stood on the threshold like a landlord delivering an eviction notice. I need you to leave by tomorrow evening, Lillian. Phoebe, I understand you're grieving, but surely we can— No. She held up a hand. I've made my decision. This house is in Alaric's name, which means it's mine now. I need time and space to process my grief. Without complications. Complications? You living here. It's not working anymore. I need my privacy. I looked at this woman who had once hugged me at Christmas dinners, who had cried real tears when Alaric proposed, and I searched for any trace of that person. Where exactly do you expect me to go? She shrugged. You're a grown woman, Lillian. You'll figure something out. Ruth's voice echoed in my head. Don't react. Wait. Watch. So instead of saying the things boiling inside me, I said, I know you're angry with me, Phoebe, and maybe I deserve some of it. I wasn't a perfect mother-in-law, but I loved your husband and I loved this family. Something flickered across her face. Just for a moment, then it was gone. David felt sorry for you, she said quietly. That's the only reason you were here. David, his middle name. I'd noticed over the years that Phoebe called him David when she was being most honest. In private, in anger, in moments when the polished wife disappeared and the real woman surfaced. The rest of the family had always called him Alaric, but Phoebe wanted her own version of my son, a version that belonged only to her. I see, I said. 6 o'clock tomorrow. I'll help you carry things to your car. I packed 67 years of life into 4 suitcases and 2 cardboard boxes, the shoebox of Harold's letters, the photo albums from Alaric's childhood, my mother's hand-knitted shawl, the Teacher of the Year certificate from 1998, the porcelain tea set, the only thing left from my wedding. At exactly 6 p.m., Phoebe appeared in the doorway with her arms crossed. Time's up. We made 3 trips to the car in silence. On the last trip, I paused at the front door. Will you at least tell me if there's a formal reading of Alaric's will? I asked. I assume he left some instructions. Phoebe looked at me with genuine puzzlement. Why would he leave you anything? You're not his wife, and it's not like you ever contributed financially to this household. The $40,000. The loan Alaric had promised to repay. Apparently it had evaporated from Phoebe's memory entirely, or been reclassified in her mind as something she was never obligated to acknowledge. Of course, I said. Silly of me. I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched Phoebe stand in the driveway until my car disappeared around the corner. I checked into the Hampton Inn on Route 9. $89 a night. Room 214. I carried my suitcases inside, sat on the bed, and stared at my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. A widow, childless, homeless, living on Social Security, $1,800 a month, and a teacher's pension of $600. Total income, $2,400. Savings from the house sale, $55,000 minus 2 years of modest spending, leaving roughly $47,000. Rent for a one-bedroom in the Hartford area, $1,200 to $1,500 a month. It would be tight, very tight, but not impossible. I wasn't destitute. I wasn't helpless. I was just alone. I called Ruth. I'm booking you a flight to Phoenix, she said immediately. You're living with me. No, Connecticut is where Alaric grew up. It's my home. I'm not running away. Then at least don't do anything stupid. Don't beg that woman. Don't react. Wait and watch. For almost 4 weeks, I waited. I watched apartment listings on my old laptop. I ate continental breakfast in the hotel lobby with traveling salesmen and young couples passing through. I accepted a call from Pastor Thomas Brennan, who'd heard what happened from a neighbor and offered to help me find housing through the church's senior assistance program. I thanked him but said I wanted to handle it myself. The pride of a woman who'd been independent her entire life. Stubborn, maybe, but mine. And then, on the 26th day, my phone rang. Mrs. Ashcroft, this is James Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I handled your son's legal affairs. Yes, Mr. Morrison. I remember meeting you at Alaric and Phoebe's house closing. I'm calling to inform you that the probate process is complete. There will be a formal reading of Alaric's will next Tuesday at 2 p.m. in my office. Your presence is required. Required? I sat up straighter. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, but Phoebe seemed quite certain that I wouldn't be Mrs. Ashcroft. His voice was gentle but firm. I can only tell you what Alaric's will specifies, and it specifically names you as a beneficiary. I'll see you Tuesday at 2 p.m. After he hung up, I sat in that hotel room holding the phone against my chest. Beneficiary. Alaric had left me something. Probably Harold's old watch. Maybe the childhood photo albums Phoebe had no use for. Some small keepsake to prove that I hadn't been entirely erased from my son's life. I didn't dare hope for anything more. But for the first time in almost 4 weeks, something stirred in my chest that wasn't grief. Something fragile and tentative, like a bird testing a mended wing. Tuesday came slowly, the way important days always do. I spent the morning ironing the navy blue dress that Alaric had given me for my 65th birthday. He'd picked it out himself, which was unusual for him. Most years he'd hand me a gift card and apologize for not being more creative. But that year, he'd walked into a department store and chosen this dress. Simple, elegant, the exact shade of blue I've always loved. And when I opened the box, he said, I saw it and thought of you, Mom. You always look good in blue. I wore it to his will reading because it felt like armor. His armor. I arrived at Morrison & Associates at 1:45 p.m. and sat in my car watching the entrance. At 1:52, the silver BMW pulled in. Phoebe stepped out in another black dress. Donna was beside her. Slacks, gray blouse, sensible flats. The nurse in her. Practical even at a will reading. When I walked into the reception area, Phoebe's face darkened. What is she doing here? She demanded of the receptionist. Mrs. Ashcroft is here for the will reading, the young woman replied professionally. Which Mrs. Ashcroft? Both of you, apparently. Phoebe turned to Donna and whispered something. Donna glanced at me, and I caught something unexpected. Not hostility, but something closer to guilt. She looked away quickly. We sat on opposite sides of the waiting room. At exactly 2 p.m., James Morrison appeared. Kind-faced, silver-haired, gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of lawyer who still shook your hand with both of his. His office smelled like old books and furniture polish. Mahogany desk, bookshelves, a framed law degree from UConn. We sat. Phoebe in the center chair, leaning forward. Donna behind her with a notepad. Me off to the side, hands folded. "I know this is a difficult time," Mr. Morrison began. But Alaric was very specific about his wishes. I'll read the will in its entirety. The first section was what I expected. Phoebe inherited the house on Winding Brook Lane, valued at approximately $480,000. Both cars. Alaric's 401k, roughly $120,000, and his life insurance policy, $200,000. Phoebe nodded at each item. Occasionally she glanced at me with satisfaction. Then Mr. Morrison paused. He adjusted his glasses. "There is, however, one final provision that Alaric added 3 months ago." Phoebe stopped nodding. Donna looked up. I held my breath. Mr. Morrison read, "To my mother, Lillian Ashcroft, who provided the down payment for our home and has never once asked for repayment, I leave the contents of safety deposit box number 337 at First National Bank, along with all associated documentation and account information contained therein." Silence. Then Phoebe. "What safety deposit box?" Alaric never mentioned a safety deposit box. "Apparently it was something he maintained privately," Mr. Morrison replied. "For how long?" "Approximately 5 years." Phoebe flushed. "If there's anything of value in that box, it should be part of the estate. We need to contest this. You're certainly free to try, but the provision is very clear, and Alaric was completely competent when he added it. I witnessed the document myself. That was when I noticed Donna. She wasn't writing anymore. She was staring at her own hands, and her expression was one of someone who already knows what's coming. She wasn't surprised. Not even a little. I turned to Mr. Morrison. "When exactly did he add this provision?" "February 15th. He came in specifically to make this addition." February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day. I remembered that evening. Alaric, Phoebe, and I had eaten dinner together. Phoebe spent most of the meal complaining about the neighbor's dog and the construction noise on Elm Street. Alaric barely spoke. He pushed his food around his plate and stared out the kitchen window with an expression I couldn't read. At the time, I thought he was tired. Now I wondered what he'd discovered on Valentine's Day that sent him to his lawyer's office the very next morning. Mr. Morrison pulled out a sealed envelope. Cream-colored, heavy, with my name written on the front in Alaric's handwriting. "These are the bank documents and Alaric's personal key. The bank will need to verify the death certificate. Usually takes about 3 business days." Phoebe's eyes locked onto that envelope. "I'm coming with you to the bank." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Mr. Morrison said. "Access is restricted to Mrs. Lillian Ashcroft only. Bank policy." "This is insane." The composure was cracking now. "How do we even know there's anything in there? It could be empty. Sentimental junk." I stood, holding the envelope against my chest. "I suppose we'll find out." In the parking lot, Phoebe caught me before I reached my car. "Lillian," softer now, the negotiator. "Let's be reasonable. Whatever's in that box, we should share it. Alaric would have wanted his family to benefit. You made it very clear that Alaric wouldn't have left me anything. Now suddenly you're concerned about sharing?" The mask slipped. Underneath was something hard and afraid. "Don't forget, Lillian, you're homeless. You need my goodwill more than I need yours." I unlocked my car. "Actually, Phoebe, I don't think I need anything from you at all." I drove away. My hands were shaking, but my voice had been steady. 3 business days later, I stood in the lobby of First National Bank on Farmington Avenue. The manager, Mrs. Patricia Peterson, was expecting me. "Box 337 is one of our larger units," she explained as she walked me through the security doors to the vault. "Your son rented it about 5 years ago and visited quite regularly." "How regularly?" "Every few weeks, sometimes more often. Every few weeks, for 5 years. Over 100 visits, each one a secret kept from everyone. My quiet son, making his quiet trips, building something none of us could see." Mrs. Peterson used her master key while I inserted Alaric's. The box slid out smoothly, large, about the size of a briefcase, heavier than I expected. "Take all the time you need," she said, showing me to a private room. "I'll be right outside." The door clicked shut. I was alone. Small room, single table, fluorescent light humming overhead. I opened the box. The first thing I saw was a letter. White paper, folded once, addressed to me in Alaric's handwriting. What I found in that box changed everything. But more than the money, more than the documents, it was the letter that broke me open and put me back together. I need to read it to you. Every word. Because my son wrote it knowing he might not be alive when I found it, and the least I can do is make sure his voice is heard. Mom, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm guessing Phoebe has already shown you exactly who she really is. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not surprised. I need to tell you something I should have said while I was alive. I knew everything. Every time she made you feel small. Every time she rolled her eyes at your cooking when you weren't looking. Every time she accidentally scheduled family events on days you had doctor's appointments. I saw it all. And I'm ashamed that I didn't stop it. You're probably wondering why. The truth is, I was afraid, not of Phoebe, of losing you. I was afraid that if I confronted her, she'd make me choose. And I was terrified that the confrontation would hurt you more than the quiet cruelty. That was my weakness, Mom. I chose peace over justice, and I'm sorry. But I didn't do nothing. You gave us $40,000 for our house. You called it a loan. Phoebe called it a family contribution. I called it what it was, your life savings given out of love. 5 years ago, I opened an investment account in your name. I started with what I could afford, $200 a month from my salary, routed through an account Phoebe doesn't know about. Over time, as my salary grew, I increased it. I also deposited the equivalent of your $40,000 from my own savings, money I earned freelancing on weekends, doing contract coding work that Phoebe thought was just a hobby. The account balance as of my last check, $185,000. It's not a fortune, Mom, but it's enough for you to find a home of your own, a place where no one can make you feel unwanted. There's more in this box, a folder I called documentation. I've been saving screenshots, emails, and records for 3 years, everything that shows the pattern. Not to punish Phoebe, but to protect you. If she tries to contest the will or claim you owe her something, this folder is your shield. One more thing. I found out on Valentine's Day that Phoebe had already been planning what she'd do after. I found an email thread between her and Donna about the life insurance, about the house, and, I'm sorry to tell you this, about having you declared incompetent to access your pension. They never went through with it, but they discussed it. The screenshots are in the folder. I went to Mr. Morrison the next day and changed my will. Mom, I know you'll want to forgive Phoebe. That's who you are. But please, for once in your life, put yourself first. Take this money. Build something that's yours. And when you think of me, don't think of the son who didn't defend you out loud. Think of the son who defended you the only way he knew how. Quietly, from behind the scenes, the way I've done everything my whole life. Remember the bird with the broken wing? You told that story at every Thanksgiving. Alaric fixed broken things without asking for credit. You were right, Mom, but the thing I was trying to fix was your future. I love you. I always loved you most. Your son, Alaric. I sat in that windowless room and cried for 40 minutes. Not the grief I'd been carrying since the hospital. That was a heavy, suffocating thing, like drowning in slow motion. This was different. This was the kind of crying that cracks you open and lets light pour in. Because for the first time since Alaric died, I didn't feel like he was gone. He was right there, in every careful sentence, in every dollar he'd quietly saved, in every screenshot he'd taken to make sure his mother would be safe. I read the letter 3 times. Each time I found something new. The way he wrote I was afraid. Not of Phoebe, but of losing me. My quiet, gentle son had been carrying this weight alone for years, and he'd chosen the only weapon he knew. Patience, planning, and love expressed in spreadsheets and safety deposit boxes. When I could see clearly again, I opened the folder labeled Documentation. Dozens of printed emails, text message screenshots, photographs of credit card statements, emails between Phoebe and Donna discussing the Lillian situation, texts where Phoebe called me that old bat and joked about turning my room into a home gym, credit card statements showing $15,000 in charges the month before Alaric died, spa treatments at a resort in Westport, designer clothes from Nordstrom, a weekend trip to New York with Donna, all while Phoebe told Alaric they were worried about grocery money, and the Valentine's Day emails. The ones where Phoebe and Donna discussed, in clinical detail, the process for having an elderly family member declared mentally incompetent. They'd researched it. They'd discussed timelines. Donna had looked into which doctors in the Hartford area might be sympathetic. They never went through with it, but they'd planned it. While I was downstairs serving them pot roast every Sunday, in the parking lot I called Ruth. "How much?" she asked. $185,000. A long silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from my unshakable older sister, a voice that cracked and broke. "That boy, that beautiful, quiet boy. He knew everything, Ruth. He knew, and he never said a word. Because he was protecting you, the same way he protected that bird. What do I do now? Now you live, Lily. You live the life your son paid for." I called Pastor Brennan next. He told me about Oak Hill Residences in West Hartford, a senior apartment complex, clean and safe, $1,100 a month. I drove there that afternoon and put down a deposit. Apartment 2B, second floor. Small balcony overlooking a community garden. A home. My home. A place where no one could tell me to leave by 6 o'clock. That evening, back at the Hampton Inn, I spread Alaric's folder across the bed and looked at everything. Every screenshot, every email, every credit card statement. And I asked myself, what would Alaric want me to do with this? Not revenge. He'd written that clearly. Protection. He wanted me protected. But he also wanted me to walk into whatever came next with my eyes open. So I chose carefully. A few key screenshots saved to my phone. The folder in my bag. Not as weapons. As truth. And then my phone rang. Phoebe. Her voice was silk and sweetness. "Lillian, I was wondering if you'd like to come by for lunch tomorrow. We could discuss what you found in the safety deposit box." I looked at myself in the hotel mirror. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd checked in 26 days ago. Still 67. Still grieving. But there was clarity in her eyes now. The kind that comes when someone you love tells you the truth from the other side of forever. "That's very generous, Phoebe. I'll be there at noon." She'd set a beautiful table. Wedding china, fresh flowers, cloth napkins folded into little fans. Chicken salad. Your favorite, Lillian. Iced tea in crystal glasses. The whole performance orchestrated as carefully as a wedding reception, which made sense. This was Phoebe's profession. She managed events, and this was her most important production yet. We made small talk for exactly 8 minutes. The weather, the azaleas blooming early, the neighbor's new fence. Then Phoebe set down her fork and got to the point. "I've been thinking about what Alaric left you. Family should stick together. Maybe we could pool our resources, combine whatever was in that box with the life insurance. I have some wonderful financial advisors." "That's very thoughtful. But I'm curious. What makes you think there was anything valuable in the box?" She hesitated. Alaric was always so private about financial matters. "Private." I let the word hang between us. "That's an interesting choice of words." I reached into the bag I'd brought and pulled out a small wrapped package. "I brought you something." She opened it. Inside was a framed photograph of Alaric at his college graduation. Cap and gown, that shy smile, the whole future ahead of him. Her face softened. For just a moment, something real passed through her eyes. Not calculation. Grief. Actual grief for the man in the photograph. I saw it, and I want you to know that I saw it, because what happened next doesn't erase the fact that Phoebe Ashcroft, in her own broken way, had once loved my son. "I thought you should have it," I said. "After all, you were such a devoted wife." The air changed. She looked up sharply. "Just tell me what was in the safety deposit box, Lillian." "Documents, mostly. Very interesting reading material. Financial records, investment statements, some correspondence." I paused. "Quite a few printed emails and text messages." The color drained from her face. I opened my phone and showed her the first screenshot. Her text to Donna from 6 months ago. "God, I can't wait until that old bat finally moves out. Then we can turn her room into the home gym I've been wanting." She lunged for the phone. I pulled it back. "There are dozens more. This next one is you and Donna discussing how to convince Alaric that I should contribute more to household expenses, when the mortgage was already covered entirely by his salary." "Stop." barely a whisper. And then there's the email thread from Valentine's Day, the one where you and Donna researched the process for having me declared mentally incompetent to access my pension. Phoebe didn't lunge again. She didn't argue. She sank into her chair like someone who'd been holding herself upright by sheer will and had finally run out. "He knew," she said. Her voice was hollow. "He knew everything, and he never said a word to me." "No, he didn't." "Why?" She looked up, and for the first time I saw her without any mask at all. No charm, no calculation, no performance. Just a woman staring at the wreckage of her own choices. If he knew, why didn't he just confront me? Divorce me? Why did he stay? The most important question in this whole story. And I didn't have a perfect answer, but I had the only honest one. I think because despite everything, he still hoped you'd change. He loved the woman he married, Phoebe. He just couldn't find her anymore. She was crying now, not the composed tears from the funeral. These were ugly, raw, the kind that twist your face and steal your breath. Real tears for the first time since the hospital. Maybe for the first time in years. "I did love him," she said. "I know you don't believe that, but I did. In the beginning. I believe you. But somewhere along the way, you loved what he could give you more than you loved him." "That's not—" She stopped, swallowed. Then, very quietly, "Maybe." A long silence. Two women sitting across a table set with wedding china, both of them missing the same man for very different reasons. "He was too good for me," Phoebe said. "Yes," I said. "He was. I wasted him." Her voice broke on the word. "I had this good, quiet man, and I wasted him." There it was, the truth, spoken aloud in a sunlit dining room, surrounded by fresh flowers and chicken salad, and all the beautiful props of a life built on appearances. Phoebe Ashcroft finally saw herself clearly, and what she saw made her weep. I didn't forgive her. I want to be honest about that. I didn't reach across the table and take her hand and tell her everything would be all right. Some things can't be fixed with kindness, and some damage runs too deep for a hug to reach. But I didn't destroy her either. "I'm not going to show anyone those documents," I said. "Not because you deserve mercy, but because Alaric saved them to protect me, not to punish you." She looked up, confused. "You will live in this house. You will collect the life insurance. You will have everything Alaric worked for, but you will live with the knowledge that your husband saw exactly who you were, and instead of hating you, he spent his last years quietly making sure the one person you tried to erase would be okay." I stood up, picked up my purse, walked toward the door. Phoebe didn't call after me. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't hostile. It was just empty. The silence of two people who have finally said everything there is to say. I stepped out into the March sunshine. Connecticut in early spring. Still cold, but the air smelled like wet earth and something green pushing up through it. I drove to Oak Hill Residences. Apartment 2B. My key in my hand. My home. 3 months later, I'm sitting on my balcony. There's a pot of chrysanthemums on the railing, Alaric's favorite flower, and a framed photo of us from our last Christmas together on the small table beside my tea. The apartment is small, but it's mine. Pastor Brennan brought over a casserole last week. Mrs. Peterson at the bank helped me set up automatic transfers from the investment accounts. She says at this rate, I'll be comfortable for the rest of my life. I started volunteering at the elementary school on Tuesdays, helping children with reading. It reminds me of teaching. It reminds me that I still have something to give. Last week, I received an unmarked envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Alaric at 7 years old, grinning ear to ear, cradling a sparrow with a bandaged wing. On the back, in handwriting I recognized as Donna's. Found this in Phoebe's drawer. Thought you should have it. D. Donna. The sister who'd sat in those email threads and gone along with Phoebe's plans, but also the sister who'd said that seems harsh at the funeral. The one who couldn't quite meet my eyes at the will reading. Maybe guilt has its own timeline. Maybe decency doesn't disappear. It just takes a while to find its way back. I held that photograph for a long time. The little boy with the sparrow. The boy who fixed broken things without asking anyone to notice. Alaric's letter lives in my nightstand drawer. I read it every night before I sleep. Not because I'm sad, because it's how I talk to my son. Some people will hear this story and call it revenge. It wasn't. Some will call it justice. Maybe. But I think it was something simpler than either of those words. It was a son keeping his promise. "I'll always take care of you, Mom." He said that once, years ago, over Thanksgiving dinner. I thought it was just something sons say. I didn't know he meant it literally. I didn't know he'd been planning it for 5 years. One quiet deposit at a time, one secret visit to a safety deposit box, one careful letter written for the day he wouldn't be here to say the words out loud. Sometimes the greatest love isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It sits in a metal box in a bank vault, waiting patiently for the moment it's needed most. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it arrives just in time to mend a broken wing. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have a quiet person in your life who shows love through action instead of words, tell them you see it. Tell them while you still can. Because I can't tell Alaric anymore, but I see it now. I see everything he did. And that, more than any amount of money, is the greatest gift my son could have given me.